Hey everyone. So, over the weekend I recorded a much longer video, it was about 24 minutes long, where it showed a more involved blueprint. And as I thought about the class and what we have going on tonight, I thought that might be a little too much to throw and not be able to really cover the way I would like to, the way you deserve in the time that we have. So maybe simplify, maybe just make our focus more specific on one thing. So that's what this is going to be. I'm going to share with you the blueprint that we're going to use for our next week's assignment, which is going to be writing a 4-leveled interactive song, or 4-tiered interactive song. What's nice is the blueprint is all done for you. It is a little bit imposing the first time you look at it, but when you break it down into its parts and also the way I have it structured, it should be pretty easy for you to manage. So here is that blueprint. Probably one of the bigger ones you've seen so far. It's broken up into basically 4 parts. Let's go over the top one. Setting up Quartz. So Quartz, if you don't know, is all based on scheduling. It's based on time. Video games, a lot of the times, have fluctuation in how fast or slow they handle various calculations, various performances. We've all done this with a computer where, especially an older one, you double click to open up an app, you double click to open up a document, and it waits and it waits, and you're just kind of waiting for it to open up, right? That's everything being loaded up, and some computers do this faster, some do it slower, or even different applications, different games can have different levels of how fast or slow they open up. Some of this is very noticeable as a user. Graphics slowing down, jittery motion, that's extremely noticeable and sometimes distracting or annoying to you as a performer or player, as a user. Other things are less distracting. You might have something where there's some background slowdown in a computation, but you barely notice it as a user. Maybe the time values are so small it doesn't really impact you, or maybe it feels a little laggy. It just depends. Quartz is an answer to this, where it removes music and sound, or other things you can use, but this is primarily, in our case, going to be music and sound. It removes it off of the game clock, because since the game clock can have that fluctuation in time, it's not keeping steady time. Quartz is just the opposite. It will keep consistent time all the way through. And so what you have to do first is you have to set up, well, what are the parameters of our clock, our Quartz clock right here. So the event begin play, I can't talk today, you're opening up the level, and immediately it's going to say, I'm going to get my clock. But I need to understand, first off, what's my time signature? Okay, well, what's my number of beats? What's my beat type? And then we're going to say, this is going to be clock 1, we're going to set it to clock 1. So right off the bat, we're saying we're going to understand what is our time signature. 4/4, 6/8, 3/8, whatever. Then we're going to try and figure out, well, what are our beats per minute? What's our tempo? And we're going to set that. So we've already set up our time signature and now our tempo. And then you're going to set these boundaries. All of these for our use today, we have quantization values. I'll go into that in a second. But then everything else is tied to the bar line. We're going to be making changes at the bar. You can make changes at 2 bars from now. You can make changes at the next 8th note. You have all these different time values that you can pick. But right now, the way I have this set up, it's doing bar line, bar line, bar line. And they're going to cue the music. So you're going to set up your time signature, you're going to set up your tempo, you're going to set up your boundaries. What are you going to be looking at? What is Quartz going to be counting? 8th notes, quarter notes, bar lines, half notes, whatever. And then you're going to say, okay, now I'm ready to say, give me the music stuff. We're not playing it yet, we're just going to cue it up, have everything all lined up in a pretty little row, which is the second section, cue music. Over here, I haven't talked about this too much, but this is cue music. And if I double click this, it's going to fast forward over, this is a custom event. Those two are talking to each other. We're going to set up our first tier, tier 1. And it's going to be playing at full volume. That's why it says new volume 1. It's turned all the way up. It's also looking at the bar. It's still referencing that same Quartz clock that we already set up over here. So everything's going to be marching to the same drummer. And then it's just going along. Now we're going to make our second tier. And then it's going to be set to a different volume. This one was set to 1. this one is set to 0. We don't have it turned on yet. We don't want it playing just yet. It's going to still look at the same clock, do all that stuff, and it's still looking at the bar line. Then we're going to create our third tier, and it's going to be set to 0 volume as well. It's looking at the bar line, it's referencing the same clock, you notice the pattern, and then so on. The fourth one is the one that's a little bit different. We're going to create our fourth one, and it's going to have a new volume of 0 as well. So tiers 2, 3, and 4 turned down. Only tier 1 is turned up. It's referencing the clock, and it's looking at the bar line. And this is the only thing. Once we get to the fourth tier, this little red line, this delegate, it's going to go down to all music is queued. Once it goes through 1, 2, 3, and 4, it says, I got all my music ready to go. I know my tempo, I know my time signature, I know when I'm counting. Bars, eighth notes, chord notes, whatever. Then it's going to say, all right, we're going to cue this up, and once, only one time, we're going to start that clock, that quartz clock right there. That's all these first two boxes are doing. They look really imposing, but really they're just saying, give me all the information so I know. Are we counting off at 120 at 6/8? Are we counting off at 100 at 4/4? What are we doing here? The third section is counting and logging. So quantization values. Remember how I talked about over here the cue music? Double click that, fast forwards over here. Well, the quantization values is right here. Quantization values. And that's down here. This is all about counting and logging. Now, if I expand this out, this gives you bar, which is what we're looking at in this blueprint. But you can look at beat, 32nd, 16th notes, 8th notes, chord notes, half, whole. Then you have your dotted variations of those. You have your triplet variation of those. Or on tick, smallest value, it's the same as a 32nd note, or none. Right now we're looking at bar line. But if you ever want to explore other variations of measurements, you can right there. So what this is doing, it's saying, okay, quantization type is bar line. Great. We're going to print that to the screen. Every time we're playing it here, you're going to see measure. What we're printing to the screen is right here. Measure, the colon, and then whatever number it is. 1, 2, 3. The little segment I gave you guys is 8 bars. 8 bars long. Which, by the way, right here, all this is doing is saying when the number of bars equals, and this is another value, or another variable, I put 8 right here. The reason being is because when we get to bar 8, on the beat 1 of bar 8, it's going to be ready to play the next instance of that song. Because none of these tracks are actually set to looping. Now looping is fine when you have one tier. And you're just going to loop. It's just going to have that one. And that's all we've been doing so far in this class. We've been pushing play on one piece of music and say, loop this. And it just loops it forever. It knows how long that file is and it's no problem. The reason why we can't use that method in this is because we have multiple wave files. And so it might say looping here and then it has to start another layer. It's better to do it this way. This is looping, all of a sudden this needs to come in, and what if this is a little bit off, or really, really off? It's going to mess up the synchronicity. It's not going to be in time, in sync with each other from level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's why we can't just simply go, hey, we're just going to set to looping and go to sleep and be fine. We have to do what's called re-triggering the music. And that's what's happening here. When the bar line gets to 8, and it's doing that bar 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. On beat 1 of bar 8, it's going to know I need to prep the next thing to play at the next bar, which is what it's doing right here. It's saying, okay, if this is true, if it's at bar 8, prep the music because at the next bar line, which would basically be bar 9, but since we're looping it, it's going to be bar 1. It's going to redo the music. It's going to reset this counter. So it says, instead of saying bar 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, it's going to go 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, because I put 8 as the max value. and then it's going to reset that, and it's still looking at the bar line. Which leaves us our final thing. Now, these little events are in the other video I made over the weekend, which I'll still provide to you. And it has some good information about some other ways, but especially doing, well, you have instantaneous toggling of music. This is all going to fade in. Or you have like proximity based, as you get close to something, certain levels of the music come up or come down based on your distance to that object. Some really cool stuff, which we can dig into more in future classes as we have time. But as I explained in that video, and I'm going to explain here, these little numbers here, they're acting like my game events. Because I don't have a full game to say, hey, when you have 3 lives left, play this music, 3 hearts or whatever. This is just a substitute. This is so we can control it. When you press 2, it's going to activate layer 2. Now this is a flip-flop. We talked a little bit about flip-flops before. A flip-flop literally has one bit of logic saying, I'm going to do A, but next time I'm going to do B. I'm going to do B, next time I'm going to do A. A, B, A, B. It's a flip. It's just going back and forth. That's all it's doing. So if I push 2, it's going to say, okay, set tier 2 activate. It was set to 0. And it's going to look for that bar line. Is this the quant 1 tier? Is this bar, is it a bar line or not? If it's not a bar line, it's going to keep this gate closed. If it is a bar line, it's going to let the logic go through. And then the sequence says, do this first, then close the gate. You can't go through a closed gate. And so what this is doing is saying, if you're at the bar line, great, keep going. If you're not, wait till you are. Once you do that, you're going to say, all right, now these timelines right here, there's 4 of them. To quickly go through this, it's simply going to do 0 time, 0 volume when you're over here in this corner. And as you go over this way from left to right, that is your time. From bottom to top, that is your value, whatever it is. In our case, our value is volume. So as this number goes higher, our volume goes higher. As we go from left to right, more time is elapsing. I've got this set to 1 second. So it's 0, 0, no volume, no time has passed, nothing is sounding. As you get to a 1 second mark, it's full volume. So, if I go back to this, notice this says play from start. Can't talk today, I swear. So play from start, it's going to be going from left to right, just like we read. But this one down here says reverse. So we're going to go from top down. So this would be turning it down versus playing from start would be turning it up. So what these do is every time you push, for example in this case, 2, if I push it once, it's going to turn it up. If I push 2 again, it's going to turn it down. It toggles on, off, and it's doing it. Now I have this new rate right here because I told you these timelines are all 1 second long. But if you do the math, a new rate right here for turning it on, it's going to go 2 times. So it's going to be faster than 1 second. And then if you look at this rate, 0.5, it's slower, and that's turning it down. It's going to have a slower, a slower fade out. And that's intentional. If we had this the same, just be fading, and fade out would be the same length. Going to set that new volume, and then we're going to say, okay, quantize layer 2 fade in or out, depending on which one you've toggled, at the next bar line. And that's what it's going to be doing for 3, and that's what it's going to be doing for 4. That's all it's doing. By the way, these print strings, I say this in the other video, but I will say it again here for this class. I'm going to do this lecture in class today, is these print strings are invaluable. If you're ever doing something and you're not quite sure, am I imagining this is working? Am I imagining it's hearing? I'm not quite sure if it really is or not. The print strings will show you exactly what's happening. If you don't see a print string happening and you know you're pushing the right key, well then something over here is broken. But in our case, it shows up just fine. But it's a great way to validate. So that is Quartz. That's the whole thing. It's kind of complicated, but it's also kind of not. I'm going to show you and have you experience it. Then I'm going to show you how I'm setting it up, because the way I set this up is even easier than what we see here. But let's just play it for the beginning. Not off to a good start. Oh, did I clear everything? I bet you I did. Okay, I cleared everything. Okay, I forgot I did that. Well, let's just jump into this. Let's just set it up together. All right, so this is the level, and this is the blueprint. And you notice right here it has BPM 100, num beats 4, beat type 4, so it's 4/4 time. And then you have these tiers, and they're all empty right now. But the reason why you're not going to use these struts over here, strut is basically a track of music I wrote for Skatebird. These are mix downs. For example, you hear just the drums. Then you hear drums and bass. Then you hear drum, bass, and guitar. Now, the problem with it, I'll go ahead and just show you. The problem is you're going to have drums in layer 1. Then you're going to have drums and bass with layer 2 and 1 playing, because all these are going to stack on top of each other. Then you would have drums, bass. You would have multiple instances basically of everything, and it's going to get louder and louder. And I'll just show you what I mean. Also, I can just show you how you can set things up here. If I push play, that's 1. Got a little bit louder because now we actually have 2 instances of the bass, sorry, drums, 1 instance of the bass. It's a little bit louder now because we have even more instances. We have 3 instances of the drums, 2 instances of the bass, 1 instance of guitar. You can hear what's happening. You have more and more compounding on top of each other because the previous layer is also included in the new layer that you're queuing in for these things. So it's just making it louder and louder and louder. The better way to do it is to do it this way. So let's just clear these out. And finally this one. Now, these over here are just the individual layers. So let's pop these in. Tier 1, Tier 2. And this can also just re-emphasize, this is how you're going to set these up. I've made this way so you don't have to interact with the blueprint as much. You can just interact with the menu, which is very easy to do. But I want you to understand and have a resource of what each of these components of the blueprint, what it's doing, what its behavior and role is. So now if we compile and save and push play, if I push 2, I pushed it too many times. There we go. Now 3 and 4. So it's not getting louder. Now you'll notice, if those were paying attention, will have noticed there's a strut 3 90 BPM. I intentionally made one that's the wrong tempo. That's the 3rd layer. Alright, so this says we're at 100 BPM, but this is going to be at 90. Let's see the magic that happens. There's 2. Let's just put in 4 next. Now we're going to add in the guitar that's at the wrong tempo. It's not going to work. So you really have to be careful that first off, all of your tiers are set up to the right tempo and that this is set up to the right tempo. Now, I didn't really make a big point about, you see it counting measure 1, 2, up here in the upper left-hand corner in blue. And as it gets to bar 8, you'll see it go back to 1 because it's re-triggering the music instead of looping it. Re-trigger and again now. So that's how it's working. Let's just try, just for fun, make my camera angle a little bit better. I'm going to set this to the wrong tempo. I'm going to set this to 105. Okay, that's changing the BPM, beats per minute. 2, 3, 4, 1. Surprised how well it's doing. Ah, but there's the rub. Did you hear it? It stayed in sync with itself, but then it started early. Okay, let it happen one more time. So obviously that won't work. So it's super important that you get this value correct as well. It's really important you get all the values correct. So what you're going to get is you're going to get this whole little interface. It's going to be, it might have this all plugged in there. I might empty it out. You can use, if you notice, these things are just sound waves, and they are not set to looping. If I go to looping behavior, which is, looping is not ticked on. Do not turn on looping. That's not what we want. Now there's one more thing that's vitally important. I do talk about this in the PowerPoint. Voice management. It may look like this. You might have to expand it out. Play when silent. Let me show you what happens if you turn this off. I'm going to say restart. And restart for this. And this. And then finally that. Cool. And let me go and push play. Nothing happens. And the reason why is because, don't forget, anytime audio is not playing in Unreal, unless it's told specifically to do something different, it's going to forget it ever existed and not pay attention to it. And since these volumes are set to 0, or since it's not in creation yet as far as Unreal is concerned, because even tier 1 is set to 1, so it is playing yet, but it's not in the level yet. It's going to be dismissed. Anything that is not actively playing, or once it's stopped, it will cease to sound. So under virtualization, and that's one reason it's important, is that's actually trying to help save resources for the Unreal Engine. If it kept everything live, regardless of how far or near you were to it, then imagine the voice count limits that would happen. It would just hit limit after limit and probably crash the game. So it's trying to be smart, but for something like music, we want this to keep it playing even when it's silent. So first off, it will play in the first place, but secondly, it can keep the progress of where it is in the song. Because if you turn off layer 2, it's still playing, but it's muted and it's keeping sync with everything else that is playing. So when it comes back on, it keeps time. So voice management, virtualization mode, play when silent, super duper important. You can also just click save all, and it will save all those things I just changed. And now if I push play, it happens. So your job, your mission, is to write 4 layers of music that's going to work well. We'll talk a little more about the nuances of writing that kind of interactive music. The nice thing is, the way I have this blueprint set up, I made everything variables. Number of beats, bar type, beats per minute, and then down here, tier 1, tier 4, tier 3, all those things are all going to be values that are public. You see this little eyeball over here, which is why when we have this set up, we can see these things. You don't have to worry about Quartz Clock. That's being handled. In fact, I could probably turn that off. If I go to Quartz Clock and do that and compile it and save it and go here, Quartz Clock is gone. Here's what you have to worry about. BPM, number of beats, beat type. Is it 6/8, 3/8, 12/4, whatever. And then you want to pop in your tiers of music. And again, Make sure the virtualization is set to play when silent. Make sure they are not looping, because Quartz itself will do the retriggering for us. And make sure they're not sum downs where they have all the existing previous tiers mixed in with them, like this over here, or this. Because then you're going to get that compounding volume issue that we had before. So this will be your project. Depending on how much time we have today, I know we have D.B. Cooper tonight. I don't know how much time that's going to take necessarily, and I don't know how fast we're going to get through this. If we get through this honking fast, great. I've got some more things I can show you. If not, perfect. We'll focus on this, and next week you will turn this in and show me your interactive music. So you'll have this Unreal project, which in the past, hopefully for this week will be the same. Doesn't seem to be an issue for you opening them up and for me opening up your version when I provide the Unreal project. The issue seems to happen when you get it directly from the marketplace and then I can't get to it. All right, I'll see you in a little bit. Thanks, guys.